Shiitake mushrooms, looking at the macronutrient profile, they're incredibly high in fibre. And there's this consumer perception or misconception that we need to eat more protein. In Western countries, 98% of us get the recommended daily intake of protein. We actually don't need to be focusing on eating more protein. And it's a little better in Australia and New Zealand, but not that much better. But in the United States, 95% of Americans don't get the recommended daily intake of fibre. You've got most of the population not getting, almost everyone getting enough protein and almost everyone not getting enough fibre in their diet. And so shiitake mushrooms are an incredibly good source of fibre. Mushrooms are 90% water, so you can eat a big volume of mushrooms and it's very low calorie, which is also good because we're particularly in the West, we're eating way too many calories.
Welcome to the Bountiful podcast. I'm Shan, and this is a space for curious, thoughtful conversations about what it really means to live a bountiful life. In a world that often rewards more, faster, and louder, Bountiful exists to slow things down, to explore joy, resilience, creativity, and the small choices that shape how we live every day. Each episode is a conversation with someone who's thought deeply about life, work, health, money, relationships, or purpose, and what they've learned along the way. If you're looking for ideas you can actually live with, you're in the right place. In this episode, Michael Fox shares the story behind Fable and the journey that brought him into the world of mushrooms, food innovation, and purpose-driven business. We talk about entrepreneurship, the lessons he's learned across his 3 startups, failure, changing your mind as you learn, and how life experiences can quietly reshape what you care about and the work you want to do. We also talk about burnout, family, nature, gratitude, and what he values now. Michael, welcome to the Bountiful podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kiwi and Australian in New York. What are you doing here?
Yeah, started a mushroom company, Fable, and we've been expanding into the US market. So we had 4 team here, so I moved over from Australia to join them and help expand the business here.
Do you want to clarify mushrooms just for the
yes.
naughty Kiwis? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, people do jump and straight away assume psychedelics. Those are maybe fun to do on the weekends, but our core business is food products. So our main product is a pulled shiitake mushroom product. So we take the stems of the shiitake mushrooms and shred them, so you get this kind of pulled meat texture. So kind of loosely in the meat alternative space, like the product is an alternative to meat. But we don't kind of position that way to customers. We really lean into the fact they're made of mushrooms and natural, and shiitake mushrooms are great.
Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and background?
So grew up in Australia. My dad was a mining engineer, so lived in lots of little mining towns. We'd sort of move to a town for 2 or 3 years, and then Dad would get a promotion. We'd move to another town. So lots of sort of little different parts of Australia. Probably the most interesting place we lived was Groote Island, this little island in the Northern Territory. That was really fun to live there as a kid. And then settled in Brisbane from when I was around 15, so finished high school, University of Queensland, and then started working in Brisbane, then did 10 years in Sydney. Been a bit all over the place since then.
And so you've had quite a few companies now, like the Mushroom Fable was not your first foray into entrepreneurship. Did your parents foster entrepreneurial spirit, or did that come later?
Yeah, I think they kind of talk about, my grandma used to talk about and my parents used to talk about the fact, I was always very entrepreneurial as a kid. I think my dad he was a mining engineer. I think he always wanted to do his own business. Like Mum and Dad would often talk about it, but I think he had a good job and was doing well career-wise, so I think that made it difficult to sort of break out of that and go and start something, but I feel like he always kind of wanted to, and so, that may have sort of influenced my thinking, but
Can you tell me about your grandma story? So I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. So she would tell the story of when I was a kid, maybe 5 or 6, and I discovered that seeds grow into plants, and that there were nurseries where they sold plants. I kind of wanted to start a nursery and grow plants in the backyard, and tried to delegate all of the jobs to grandma to grow the plants and sell the plants and then give me the money. Yeah, she was like, you've always been very entrepreneurial and a good delegator and getting other people to do things for you.
What does it mean to you to live a bountiful life?
Yeah, I think a life full of, just joy, doing good for the world, having a positive impact, having good, positive, optimistic people around. I think a combination of all of those things for me.
And then what advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
That's a good question. Find things that you're passionate about and go and work on those. Yeah, I think I partially did that as a 25-year-old, but maybe not fully. And I've done that more recently and it's been great.
What was the impact of I don't want to say not being passionate, but being less passionate about working on things?
Yeah, I think I wasn't as good. So I was 25 when I started my last company, Shoes of Prey, and I was passionate about the entrepreneurial business building side of it, but the product was custom women's shoes, and I wasn't kind of naturally passionate about customized women's shoes. And so I think that made it a little bit more challenging for me to deeply understand the customer. I wouldn't wake up on a Saturday morning and want to read fashion magazines. I think I wasn't quite as good at understanding the customer and understanding the product and the market that we were operating in, compared with the business now where I'm pretty much vegan and very passionate about food.
I mean, you are the customer now, really.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial endeavours, maybe go a bit deeper. So three businesses, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a custom shoe company, you've got a mushroom company, what was the third one?
I started a eyewear glasses company called Sneaking Duck.
Cool.
Yeah, so started that maybe on my late 20s, so what was that, 2013 or something like that. It was just trying to sort of disrupt and democratize eyewear fashion.
What lessons do you have from the B2C world, and maybe how has it changed?
Marketing channels are constantly shifting. Consumer trends and what customers are looking for are constantly shifting. So I think trying to find so you've got to find a good product, value proposition, product market fit, but then trying to find the right sort of go-to-market channels for a product. That's just always constantly shifting with new media and different ways of reaching customers.
And can we talk a little bit about Shoes of Prey? So 10 years, that's quite the innings. I guess questions I have is what was it like? How was it? You're in LA for a while. Did you raise money?
So the kind of thesis was that women would want to design their own shoes. So you could go to our website, customize shoes. It was fashion shoes, so ballet flats, heels, boots. You could change the whole shape and structure of the shoe, different leathers and materials. You would order them and then we would make them and deliver them to you. We did very well in some niches. So wedding shoes was a great niche for us. Extended sizes, because we could do small, large, wide and narrow. We didn't, because they were all made to order, we didn't have to hold all the inventory. And then very creative women was the other segment that did well. But we had all of these, we had lots of mass market consumers coming to the website who kind of loved the idea of designing their own shoes. They've designed some, saved them and not order. So we had very low conversion rates on the website. So we would talk to those customers and ask them, why aren't you ordering? And they would explain basically three things. So one, they wanted a faster delivery time. They were offering planning for an event 1 or 2 weeks out, and we had initially had a 4-week lead time. Secondly, they didn't want to pay a premium. They wanted to pay the same sort of price for the same quality shoes. And then thirdly, they wanted a simplified shoe design experience. So initially it was templated, but you started with a blank white shoe, whereas what they wanted was to shop a regular range of shoes and then modify designs. So we realised, we could deliver that value proposition, but to do that, we would have to hire software engineers and user experience people to simplify the shoe design experience, and then we would have to build our own factory to produce the shoes because the people we were outsourcing to just weren't able to scale and bring the costs down and the delivery times down. So we went out and raised venture capital. So over 4 rounds of funding, we raised 35 million Australian dollars and basically built a factory in China, hired the user experience software engineers. So over the next sort of 3 or 4 years, we got the delivery time down to 11 days from when you placed an order to receive your shoes anywhere in the world. It was a bit insane. We delivered on everything. We got the costs down, simplified the shoe design experience. So it was like a normal e-commerce shopping experience for shoes, and then you could pick a shoe and then you could modify it, change the color, maybe reduce the heel height, make it a pointed toe rather than a round toe, and place your order and get it 11 days later. And our sales grew, and we did a big distribution partnership with Nordstrom in the US, David Jones in Australia and Nordstrom in the US. So you could go into a David Jones store or a Nordstrom store and on the shoe floor, design your shoe on iPads in the store and order them. And so our sales went up, but they didn't go up anywhere near as much as we expected that they would, or as that they should have. And what we realized in now watching the customers' behavior was customers, or that mass market fashion customer, she thinks she wants to design her own shoes. So that's what she will say she wants to do. But deep down, subconsciously, she doesn't necessarily have the confidence or the time to design and decide on something. She actually really wants to buy something that a fashion designer's designed and that she's seen, that's got social proof on Instagram or in a fashion magazine or something like that. And that's the antithesis. So what she consciously thinks she wants to do and unconsciously actually wants to do are opposites. And so we delivered the wrong value proposition. We just spoke to the customer, delivered what she told us she wanted, but that was different to what she actually wanted. So massive failing on our part around consumer research, and going back to the point about being passionate about a product and a category, I think that was probably my big failing. Should have spent a lot more time deeply trying to understand the customer and the consumer psychology around shopping for fashion and for shoes, and maybe we could have got to a different result.
So interesting. I am a shoe lover. I have a very beautiful shoe collection. I was like a OG buy off eBay from New Zealand, which I'm like, I don't think that was a thing, in like the early 2000s. Now I've got all these beautiful shoes that are kind of coming to the end of their life, but I want to get them recreated, but maybe in like different colors or something. So that would have been cool if I could do that.
Yeah.
Obviously you left Shoes of Prey. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and then kind of moving into your, I don't know, like getting into the wholesome part of your journey, not to say that you haven't been wholesome your whole life. And like, was burnout a part of your journey as a founder?
Yeah, so the last couple of years of Shoes of Prey were pretty tough. Like we weren't hitting the sales numbers. We needed to be, because now we had all the fixed costs of this factory in China, we needed to be at sort of 20 to 30 million US revenue run rate to be at break even, and we were sort of stuck at about 10 million, and we just couldn't grow the business enough to get to cash flow break even, and because we weren't growing fast enough, couldn't raise any additional capital. So yeah, ultimately we closed the business down, sold the assets, basically just the brand and the factory, but didn't get that much for them. So that last couple of years was a struggle to try and make the business work. It didn't work. So yeah, ultimately had to lay off 200 people and not return any of the money that investors had invested. So yeah, that was very stressful, and definitely some solid burnout through all that process. I think some of the things that helped me through that, my first child, was born during that whole experience, and I think that kind of helped put life into perspective for me. So it was like, okay, my wife's healthy, my son's healthy, that's kind of 100 times or more, whatever it is, more important than my career going through this challenging period. And so I was able to kind of reflect on that and put things into perspective. Okay, the business is failing, got to lay off 200 people, that sucks, but no one's dying, people are going to be able to find other jobs, and venture capital firms invest in startups and lots of them fail. So I could kind of rationalize all of those things and feel grateful for the things in my life that were good. But all of that said, it was still hard, and I still needed a period after that to kind of recover.
Yeah, sounds a bit brutal. But you are right, like VCs know what they're getting into when they're investing in companies, and sort of founders do too. Like obviously you have a bold dream and you work as hard as you can to make it happen, but sometimes it just doesn't work, and that's part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we talk a little bit about like maybe your values shift and realigning your business interests with like who you are becoming? And I don't know, do we have to talk about being a Queensland meat eater? Is that like sort of the start of this whole journey?
Yeah. So Yeah, grew up in Queensland primarily, bit in the Northern Territory, and yes, big meat eater. Loved eating meat as a kid. Yeah, sort of my journey to reducing meat consumption. So my dad was diagnosed with cancer when I was 20, in my early 20s, and he was 47. And he and mum went off to this, he did all the chemotherapy and everything, but he and mum went off to this health retreat where they sort of try to help you kind of build your immune system to fight it off. And a big part of this health retreat was changing diet. And I had a reasonably healthy diet as a kid. Mum cooked a lot of good food at home. But on this health retreat, the diet that they encouraged was basically mostly a vegan diet, basically really cutting out all saturated fats. So a mostly vegan diet, and a whole food kind of vegan diet with maybe a little bit of fish. And so mum and dad came back from this retreat and started cooking all of this food and explaining the diet. And then I sort of went and read a lot about it, and there's a lot of kind of science behind why that sort of diet is really healthy. So then our diet at home shifted pretty dramatically. Dad ended up passing away from cancer, but we kind of maintained that diet at home. So that sort of sparked my thinking around a diet shift for health reasons. And then over the next 10 years, ended up just reading more about the food system and its impact on climate and the ethics of factory farming. And gradually cut down my meat consumption. Probably took me 10 years to eventually go properly vegetarian, and then another 5 years to go kind of mostly vegan. Yeah, and it's a mix of all of those reasons. It's the ethical, the environmental, and the health reasons that have shifted me that way. Yeah.
So I read somewhere that one of the reasons why you started Fable was because you were a terrible advocate or something, and so you were like, I'm going to influence where I can rather than trying to convert people.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess as I was going kind of vegetarian, or when I went vegetarian and then vegan, for me it was like just discovering all of these, the horrific ethical treatment of animals, the massive impact that, and I'll even share a couple of stories. So if I had a puppy here right now and drowned it, you would freak out. You'd probably call the police, and the police would probably come and take me away, and I'd get charged with animal cruelty. That would be awful. Whereas fish are, there's a lot of species of fish that are very intelligent. If we go fishing and kill a fish, we're doing the same thing. We're asphyxiating it and it's dying. Yet we have TV shows about fishing, and fishing is a hobby that people can do, but there's actually no ethical difference between drowning a puppy and fishing and killing a fish. You're doing the same harm, the same amount of pain. It's just that we relate to a puppy and we don't relate to a fish. Even closer example is the way we treat pigs and dogs. Pigs are actually on average more intelligent than most species of dog, but we treat them really poorly and kill them and eat them, whereas if we ate a dog, people would freak out at the idea of that. So it's just this there's no logical reason why we do those things differently, or no justifiable ethical reason. The reason we do it is just because we relate to some animals more than we relate to others, which is not a ethical framework for the way we treat animals. So as I was kind of discovering those kinds of things, it was kind of blowing my mind, and I was wanting to tell everyone around me, that story and similar stories, and try to convince them, hey, we should all stop eating animals. This kind of seems obvious to me that we should stop treating fish and pigs this way because we love dogs, we should treat them the same. But it was very difficult, even telling that story. Most people I think there's a cognitive dissonance. People just almost don't want to hear it, and they even get annoyed at you for telling them things like that because it triggers something. Oh, okay, maybe you're right, and maybe I should stop eating pigs and fish, but I don't want to because they're delicious and it's convenient. So you're causing this whole cognitive dissonance in people's minds, and they don't want to shift. So I found it very, very difficult trying my hand at being a vegan activist and convincing the people around me to turn vegan. And I think in doing all of that, I think I convinced 3 people to turn vegan. 2 of them work for Fable, which probably doesn't really count. The third I caught up with the other day, and he's back eating meat. So I'm a pretty terrible activist, and I probably pissed off a good 100 plus people having those conversations. So ended up realizing that the easier way to get people to reduce their meat consumption is that taste and convenience piece. If you can make food products that just people want to eat instead of meat, that are made from, in our case, mushrooms or plants, that's a much more effective route to reducing meat consumption.
So we've been talking a little bit about land, like you have 41 acres in Australia, I have 20 acres in New Zealand. Beautiful, I love growing all my own food. I'm a very keen gardener, even though that's like very boring to most people. And also a very good cook, so I love just taking like fresh produce that you've just picked and putting it on the plate and then like gifting it to the people around me. There's sort of nothing better. And just like flavour profiles, I mean, we live in one of the driest places in New Zealand, so it's just like very intense flavours. We do actually eat quite plant-based at home. We do still eat, you know, a bit of meat and fish and whatnot. What I've found with the plant-based stuff is because it's all coming from the garden, I'm more inclined to want to use fresh ingredients. I also think that a lot of people, if they aren't very good at cooking and they don't know how to create the foods that they really love, but with plant-based products or just like fresh groceries essentially, that maybe they're not that inclined. But like if you made someone a vegan dish but didn't tell them it was vegan, they would probably be like, oh my God, this is delicious.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a cultural elements, there's like what we're used to cooking. Like I remember when I first went vegetarian, it took me a good few years to, okay, well, I've got all my favorite dishes that I like cooking. How do I do vegetarian versions of them? And that was you had to make a conscious effort to make that shift. Unless you're highly motivated, that's a difficult thing to do. There's a cost to you in time and effort to do that. So yeah, I can see why people find those things challenging, and that's why we try to create products that cook the same way as meat, taste at least as good, if not better, than meat, and try to make it super convenient and easy and delicious for people to make that shift.
Why mushrooms? If we get into the Fable sort of journey.
Up until I moved to Brooklyn 9 months ago, lived on a 41-acre property on the Sunshine Coast, and big veggie garden, big orchard, grew a lot of my own food, bake sourdough, brew kombucha, eat a very minimally processed whole food-based diet. Having that's sort of my personal food and eating background and philosophy, and then wanting to help people reduce their meat consumption and realizing food is kind of the best way to do that. So I wanted to develop food products as alternatives to meat, and I was going through this thought process sort of 2018. So there was kind of this meat alternative boom in the market, like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods had raised lots of money, and there was a lot of interest in that space. But I wanted to do something, an alternative to meat that aligned with my own diet, so didn't want to use any artificial binders or ingredients, or didn't want to use any heavily processed ingredients. So started looking at, okay, well, what are some of the base kind of whole food ingredients you could use that are very meat-like, and pretty quickly got onto the idea of using mushrooms as a base ingredient. I don't know if it was the case in New Zealand, but in Australia, the Australian Mushroom Council in the 80s had this campaign, Mushrooms, Meat for Vegetarians. There's a lot of meaty umami flavours naturally in mushrooms. Even evolutionarily, fungi and mushrooms are more closely related to animals and humans than they are to plants. They branched off the tree much later, off the sort of evolutionary tree much later than plants. And there's a whole bunch of similarities between mushrooms and us. You put mushrooms out in the sun, they'll tan and develop vitamin D. It's a very similar process to what happens in our skin. And they've got a lot of glutamates and umami flavors in them. Plants breathe carbon dioxide, breathe out oxygen. We breathe oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide. Fungi are the same as us. They breathe oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide. So anyway, there's a bunch of similarities that make it much easier to take a mushroom and turn it into something meat-like than it is to take, say, a soybean or a pea and turn it into something meat-like. So you don't have to do anywhere near as much processing to make a mushroom meat-like. So it was all of those kinds of thoughts and realizations that got me down the path of exploring mushrooms. And then through that exploration, ended up meeting my co-founder, Jim Fuller. So Jim grew up in Texas. He's a fine dining chef, chemical engineer, mycologist, all wrapped up into one. And once we met, we got on super well and started the business together.
And his story was all of that, plus he fell in love with an Australian and moved to Melbourne.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
Yep.
Did you ever think you'd be a mushroom entrepreneur?
Certainly not. Certainly not when I was growing up, or no, really until starting the business. No.
And so do you grow your own mushrooms? Like, what is the sort of Fable business model, and how does it all work? Sort of, I know you've spent a lot of time considering like supply chain, even to how you grow your mushrooms, what parts of the mushroom, whether you're actually using proper mushrooms. Can you tell me about all of those sorts of insights?
Yeah, so today we use the stem of the Shiitake mushroom. So the stem is a byproduct of growing the caps. The caps are grown to be sold in retail. And the stems it's kind of like broccoli stems or cauliflower stems. They're a bit firmer in texture. Consumers don't really know what to do with them, so they usually end up getting discarded at the farm. So we take the stem, we shred it or mince it and turn it into our products. So you're kind of upcycling a byproduct. So yeah, we source the stems from existing Shiitake mushroom farms. That said, moving forward, we will eventually run out of stems because they're a byproduct. There has to be enough. There's only as much stem as there is market for caps. So we're doing a whole bunch of work now on optimizing growing Shiitake mushrooms for our purposes, because the way Shiitake mushrooms are grown today, everything's optimized for getting a small, unbruised, unblemished cap with a long shelf life to be sold fresh in retail. Whereas our output is we just want a stem. We're processing it relatively quickly, so we don't need the long shelf life, and we don't need the small, unbruised, unblemished cap. So we've been breeding a new strain of Shiitake mushroom that's like 80% stem, been breeding it so it grows a big fleshy biomass quite quickly, as opposed to Shiitake mushrooms today that you get a little flush of baby mushrooms. They're hand-picked when they're young. Wait another 6 weeks, get another flush of baby mushrooms, hand-pick them, 3 flushes, which takes sort of 6 months, actually a little bit longer from the starting of those mushrooms, the fungi growing, through to finishing the 3rd flush. Whereas for us, we can just grow one big stemmy biomass, and then because we don't need the small unbruised, unblemished cap, we can basically mow the mushrooms. So we can take out 80 to 90% of the cost of growing the mushrooms by optimizing it for our output. So we're working on that now. We'll set up a pilot facility for growing our own Shiitake stems, and then 2027, 2028, we'll start scaling growing mushrooms locally in the markets that we sell in.
So cool. I have tried to grow oyster mushrooms before. And so I'm like, oh yeah, the flush happened and then another one happened. So sort of understand that. Yeah. I have found mushrooms can be quite hard to grow. Like they grow where you don't expect them to, when you don't expect them to. And the conditions are actually quite hard to get right, unless you're a mushroom scientist like your co-founder. What sort of environment are you? I'm sort of thinking like vertical farm, but like, what are you allowed to talk about? What sort of environment you're thinking about? Yeah,
well, most mushrooms today they're farmed indoors, usually different environments for different mushrooms and for different growing processes. But Shiitake mushrooms mostly just grown in essentially like outdoor open air sheds. So they're incredibly land use efficient because you're growing them indoors. You can grow them vertically, and yeah, you can grow a lot of mushrooms in a tiny. They're about more than 1,000 times more land use efficient than on a calorie basis than beef, for example. About 10,000 times more land use efficient on a weight basis than cattle.
That's so cool. We won't digress, but really, really interesting. And I'd never actually thought about. It's so fascinating around our like preconceived notions of food. Like you think about all of the different types of meat that you get and all of the different things you can do with meat, like the mincing and the shredding. You can do the same thing with mushrooms, but I'd never thought about mincing mushrooms.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we talk a little bit about, science, nutrition, sustainability? So what's the difference between mycelium and the mushrooms, and why does that matter?
So fungi, when it grows in nature, the mycelium is the body of the fungi. So the mycelium will grow in like a rotting log or grow in the soil. And as humans, we don't really see that because sometimes if you break a log open or move some leaves aside, you'll see this like white sort of netty kind of material. That's mycelium, the body of fungi. So the body of the fungi is growing in the wood or the soil. And then when the fungi is ready to propagate, it grows a mushroom. So a mushroom is the fruiting body of the fungi. So it contains the spores, and that's how it propagates. So The analogy with an apple tree is the mycelium is the roots, trunk and branches of the apple tree, and the mushroom is the apple.
And then can you talk a little bit about why you decided to focus on the actual mushroom when a lot of other sort of brands or businesses are focusing on the mycelium part?
Yeah, so there's companies now that are growing mycelium in liquid substrates and turning that into food. We explored that path, but we decided to go and use the mushroom instead for two reasons. So if you think evolutionarily, the fungi wants us to come and eat the mushroom because that's how it spreads its spores. So if we or an animal come along and pick the mushroom, we carry it through the forest, take it away somewhere to cook it, the spores are spreading, we eat it, we excrete the spores, that helps spread the spores. So just like an apple tree wants people or someone to come and pick the apple and carry it away to spread the seeds, the fungi wants us to do that with the mushroom. So it pumps a whole bunch of flavour and nutrition into the mushroom to make it attractive for us to come and eat. Shiitake mushrooms are the most common ingredient in traditional Chinese medicine. They've got a whole range of different they've got a really good macronutrient profile and an incredible array of micronutrients in them. And they taste delicious. You cook them the right way, they taste amazing. They've evolved to taste great for us. Whereas evolutionarily, the mycelium is the body of the fungi. So the fungi doesn't want us to eat its body. So often the mycelium tastes bad, tastes bitter, or at best it might taste neutral. And the nutritional profile of the mycelium isn't as good as it is, and particularly the micronutrient profile isn't as good as the mushroom. So for both flavour and health reasons, we decided we'd use the mushroom rather than the mycelium. Second main reason is we've grown and eaten mushrooms as humans, we've evolved eating mushrooms. We've eaten them for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. We've farmed mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, we've farmed for about 6,000 years. So there's a lot of history, knowledge on how to grow mushrooms, whereas mycelium humans have never really eaten mycelium before because it's normally growing in the wood or the soil. It's really only in the last sort of 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago, a company in corn started to grow mycelium, so much, much newer. And so, it's not as much knowledge of how to grow mycelium and not as much history of it.
So you mentioned that the mushrooms that you're growing are actually really good for you because they're the fruit. Do you want to tell me what some of those sort of nutrients are that you can get from them?
Yeah, so shiitake mushrooms, looking at the macronutrient profile, they're incredibly high in fibre. So shiitake mushrooms on a weight basis are one of the highest sources of fibre that you can get. And there's this consumer perception or misconception that we need to eat more protein. In Western countries, 98% of us get the recommended daily intake of protein. We actually don't need to be focusing on eating more protein. And there's a bunch of studies. If you eat too much protein, it can actually be detrimental to longevity and have other health issues. What's crazy is it's a little better in Australia and New Zealand, but not that much better. But in the United States, 95% of Americans don't get the recommended daily intake of fibre, and it's somewhere around 80 to 90% in Australia and New Zealand. So you've got most of the population not almost everyone getting enough protein and almost everyone not getting enough fibre in their diet. But we all seem to, just in the last 10 years ago, people weren't thinking about protein.
I don't have enough protein.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't even know what it was. Whereas now there's just this obsession around protein. So whatever, I don't know why that is, whatever reason that is, but it's actually fibre that we need, is the macronutrient that most of us are deficient in. And so shiitake mushrooms are an incredibly good source of fibre. Mushrooms are 90% water, so you can eat a big volume of mushrooms and it's very low calorie, which is also good because particularly in the West, we're eating way too many calories. And then the protein, if you do care about protein, the protein to calorie ratio of mushrooms is very good. So it's generally about 1 gram of protein for every 10 calories, which is a very good ratio for protein to calories. So if you're trying to limit yourself to 2,400 calories a day, and if you just ate mushrooms, you'd get over 200 grams of protein, which is way more than you need.
Yeah. So yesterday I was having a meal, and they had the calories next to the meal on the menu, and I watched some macronutrient kind of fitnessy influencers on Instagram, and they break down macros. And so the other day, I think it was like a cheeseburger from Shake Shack or something is actually better than the Hailey Bieber smoothie or something. One's like 700 calories, the other was like 400. But she said like the healthy girl thing to do is go for the smoothie, even though you really want the cheeseburger. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting. But the calorie counts on this menu was like insane. It was like 1,000 for a salad. And I'm like, what are you putting in the salad where you get 1,000 calories? It's like, is it the dressing?
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, I've talked about it with another guest actually last week, was how important fibre is for your gut and gut health. And that's why we need fibre. And then also like vitamin D. A lot of people are really deficient in vitamin D, and that has all sorts of ramifications. And so mushrooms are really high in those things too.
They are, yep. Yeah, so vitamin D is probably the biggest micronutrient deficiency in the West. And shiitake mushrooms, I mentioned before, if you dry mushrooms in the sun, or put them out in the sun, you can even do it with store-bought mushrooms, just regular white button mushrooms. Go put them out in the sun for 15 minutes and you'll see they'll tan and their vitamin D content goes way, way up. So, similar process to what happens in our skin. And that can be a good way to get up your natural intake of vitamin D. So we partially dry our shiitake mushroom stems in the sun to up that vitamin D content.
One of the cool things in your journey has actually been you got featured on Netflix with Zac Efron. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we host mushroom foraging tours for chefs and food industry people. So we do it in Australia. We've done some tours in the UK and we do them in the US. So we take you out into the forest, show you which mushrooms you can eat, which are magic, which will kill you, whatever else you might want to learn about mushrooms. Then we do a big sort of cook-up afterwards and showcase some of the interesting cooking methods for mushrooms. And so we've been doing this for years in Australia. And Zac Efron has a show called Down to Earth with Zac Efron. It's all about sustainable living and sustainable food. And they were filming season 2 in Australia. So his producers reached out to us. They'd read about our mushroom foraging tours and asked if we would want to take Zac Efron out mushroom foraging. So of course we said yes. It was during COVID. I was stuck in Queensland, was down in Victoria, but Jim, my co-founder, and Chris, they took he and Darren Ollian out mushroom foraging, and it was a really wonderful experience.
What was it like getting that email? Because he's like kind of in context like global superstar.
Yeah. Pretty crazy to get like just a cold outreach on something like that, and then it ended up turning into a 15-minute segment on his show. So season 2, episode 2, towards the end. It's like a 15-minute segment on mushroom foraging and on all our products, and it's really cool.
That's awesome. Can we talk a little bit about? I heard you talk on another podcast, I think, and you said something that like most people eat around 200 pounds of meat per year, but only 3 pounds of mushrooms. So what's the opportunity here, do you think?
Yeah, we want to narrow that gap. So in Australia, and I'm sure New Zealand is similar, it's around 110 kilograms of land animals every year, and slightly higher mushrooms, it's about 2 kilograms of mushrooms per person per year. In China, the gap is much closer. They eat, I think, around 30 kilograms of land animals and maybe 20 kilograms of mushrooms. We want to bridge that gap, get people eating more mushrooms, eating less meat. That's the goal.
Do you want to tell me about some of the collaborations you have going on with like brands? Because that's one of your sort of major things going on in the US and part of the reason why you moved here, right?
The primary channels that we sell through are meal kit companies and restaurants. In the US, we now sell through all the major meal kit companies. So just launching with HelloFresh now, who are the biggest here, and then also Hungry Root, Purple Carrot, Cook Unity, and then in lots of different restaurant groups. So we just did a big promotion with, and a big Just Salad had us on the menu on one of their salads, a barbecue shroom bowl for spring, and then talking to them about going on their menu permanently. Lots of Mexican restaurants in the United States. In Canada, just doing a trial with 25-door trial with Quesada, who are 220-door Mexican chain in Canada. And then, in Australia, we're in Guzman and Gomez and launching into some of the other big Mexican chains shortly, as well as Fonda Mexican and lots of the sort of good, smaller premium independents. And in Marley Spoon in Australia. And then in the UK, Gusteau are the biggest meal kit company, so we sell with them, and as well as Green Chef, which is part of HelloFresh. And then in the UK, we're in Wagamama, Coat, a whole bunch of the really good premium restaurant chains.
How exciting is it this time around for you having a business that you're building on your own terms, being so aligned with it, and then also like every restaurant that you get on board, every meal kit company, you're like, we are literally changing the world in our little way every single day. Like, what's that like for you?
Yeah, it feels much better. I mean, on the Shoes of Prey journey, I went vegetarian whilst doing Shoes of Prey, and we sold mostly leather shoes. So every time we'd sell an extra pair of shoes, I'd be like happy, but also like there was just kind of almost negative impact. I mean, we launched a range of vegan leathers when I went vegetarian, but that was always a very small percentage of our sales. So I sort of had that kind of dissonance there in Shoes of Prey, whereas exactly, Fable's the opposite. We sell more product that's generally people eating. Most of our sales are meat eaters, so it's generally people eating a little bit more mushrooms and a little bit less meat. So it feels good for the business financially, but also feels good impact-wise. So that, to me personally, does make a massive difference. I mean, startup life, as you know, is very stressful, and you get high highs, you get very low lows, but it makes it much easier to work through the low lows when you know what you're doing is good positive impact, as well as being a good business. Yeah.
Can we chat a little bit about your philosophy on not needing huge resources to build something meaningful? I mean, this business, you have raised a little bit of money, but you are building things really differently, right?
Yeah, so I think learnt a lot of lessons through the Shoes of Prey journey that we've been applying in Fable, and probably some of the biggest ones is make sure you've got really strong product market fit before trying to scale too quickly. That was, I think, part of our error with Shoes of Prey. We thought we were going to have strong product market fit in that mass market consumer segment. So scaled into that with the distribution deals with Nordstrom and David Jones and building our own factory, but we actually only had product market fit in some small niches. So with Fable, it's been interesting watching the whole journey of the whole meat alternative space, because a lot of companies, I think, made the same mistake I made previously with Shoes of Prey in the meat alternative space. Everyone thought the meat alternative space was going to take off. This was the future. Companies raised hundreds of millions of dollars to scale, but actually didn't have product market fit. Yeah, there was a lot of interest in the space and a lot of trial, which did drive some early sales numbers. And so people want these products and want them to succeed, but they're not there on taste, price, or health, which are the primary reasons people would want to buy them. And so you had all these companies making exactly the same mistake we made in Shoes of Prey. So having had that experience, with Fable, we've raised a lot less capital than all the other companies in the space, and we've just focused really tightly on finding product market fit, finding it in specific areas like meal kits, Mexican cuisine, salads, in food service. So these kind of narrow segments, and working on winning those segments and growing the business at pretty close. We'd obviously raise some capital so that we can invest and grow more quickly, but growing the business at pretty close to break even. We'll be back at break even early next year. So
you are focusing a lot more on profitability, and also your team is still quite small, right? And is that really intentional?
Yeah. So we're 19 people, sort of 6 years in, and very close to profitability. Whereas Shoes of Prey, 6 years in, we were probably 100 plus people at probably less revenue than we are with Fable.
This is maybe a bit of a cheeky question, but I just have a few questions around like raising money. Do know a lot of founders, so I think it's fair to them to ask you sort of founder-related questions as well. What was it like raising money for like the different ventures?
I think probably the biggest difference between the two is Fable is like a positive impact-driven business, whereas we didn't really have that in Shoes of Prey. So it's a whole different area of venture capital that we can tap into. Like there's a lot of climate tech funds, and we sit nicely in the worlds that they operate in. So that's been helpful. But otherwise actually very similar, raising money for each one. I mean, venture capital firms, their whole model is in a fund, they might invest in 20 to 50 companies. A couple of those will be the ones that return multiple times the fund, ideally. Maybe half the businesses, they'll get their money back or a bit of a return, and half of them will go to zero. So they're looking for, every company they invest in has got to have the potential to be one of those companies that returns multiple times the fund. So yeah, so we were trying to build that kind of business with Shoes of Prey that would disrupt the shoe industry. We're trying to do the same with Fable and the food industry. Yeah.
And this one is quite personal, sorry, but like, how is your sort of psyche going back and raising money again after like not returning capital to, and sorry, it's a hard question, but I think not that many people have that experience. So not really returning any capital and then raising again, like, can you talk to me about that experience?
Yeah, that was definitely hard. And I think, a big part of my own self-esteem, self-confidence was kind of tied up in that. I mean, Shoes of Prey, 10 years from my mid-20s to mid-30s was like my whole identity, and had raised 35 million Australian dollars, didn't return that to investors and felt really bad about that. Even though that's the model, still felt really bad about that. So when I was starting Fable, I mean, I stayed in touch with a lot of those investors, and they were amazing through the whole process of closing Shoes of Prey down. Like I still vividly remember calling Rick Baker from Blackbird, and then separately calling Mike Cadden-Brooks from Atlassian. They had both been early investors and big supporters, both been on the board of Shoes of Prey at various times. And I remember calling each of them to tell them, hey, we haven't been able to find a buyer, haven't been able to raise more capital, we're going to have to shut the business down and not return any of your money. And each of them, the first thing they said was, how are you? How are the team? Like they weren't angry, they were empathetic and asking how we were going. And I remember coming out of that process thinking like, these are wonderful people, and the kind of people, if I just start another business, I would want to raise money from, but would they want to invest in me again? And so then when I was starting Fable, stayed in touch with them, and it ended up being Blackbird and Grok, which is Mike Cadden-Brooks' family office, led our first round in Fable, and that was like a massive, maybe self-confidence builder or returner, knowing that they didn't hold that against me, and that they actually wanted to invest in my next business. That was really great.
Do you think that's because you were like almost how you showed up in that process, and also just the things that they probably knew of what you learned, they knew that you would just apply that?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think if Shoes of Prey had failed because I'd been fraudulent or something like that, it obviously would have been a different result. But they saw that, acted with integrity through the whole process, and that, exactly, they saw how much I learnt, and I mean, they'd effectively paid, kind of joke, they'd paid $35 million for me to learn all of these lessons. They might as well try and get some return on that the second time around. But I'm sure there's an element of that, and being a second time founder, it is a lot easier doing it the second time around because of all of the mistakes that I made the first time around. Trying not to make the same ones again.
Can you talk, let's kind of zoom out a little bit, and sort of coming to the end of the episode. You went from having time off, becoming vegetarian, now vegan, living on 41 acres, having a family, moving to Brooklyn 9 months ago, where I saw you pop up and I was like, oh, I've got to be in New York. This person seems really interesting. So how has the transition to living in New York been for you, given that, less land, less peace maybe? Yeah,
I mean, it's a massive change from 41 acres to living in New York. I actually didn't really personally want to move. I loved where I was living, but it made sense for the business, so was happy to do it. My biggest concern was disconnecting from nature and just the energy level. I think I had in mind Midtown Manhattan, where it's just like
Times Square.
Oh my God, yeah, Times Square. It's like crazy energy levels. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm not sure I can live in that environment or for how long. And so, I was like, I don't know that I want to do that, but I'll give it a go for the business. But it's actually worked out really well. So living in Park Slope in Brooklyn, it's a very leafy suburb. Where we live is a 7-minute walk to Prospect Park, which is a 450-acre park. It's kind of very similar to Central Park. And we've got very, very lucky. A friend of mine from UQ, who had stayed in close contact with Scott Griffin, lives in Park Slope. That's kind of why we chose to live there. And it just so happened that we've ended up living right next door to him. We took the fence out of the backyard, so we've got a shared backyard. I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. He's got a 5-year-old and a newborn. My 6-year-old and his 5-year-old are best friends, constantly in each other's houses. And because we've combined the backyards, both backyards are actually reasonable size. So we've got quite a big backyard. We've got a big veggie garden there. And it's like just a beautiful space. And I take the kids to Prospect Park at least once a week. And the energy level in Park Slope or in most of Brooklyn, if Midtown Times Square is a 10 out of 10, Park Slope's probably a 7 out of 10. So I enjoy coming into Manhattan, but
leaving.
That it's nice to just go and live and literally listen to the birds in the backyard, and so I've not experienced that disconnect from nature at all. Yeah, maybe I miss the beach a little bit. I'm looking forward to getting to the beach. But
Nantucket, is that where you go?
Yeah, you can even get the subway down to Coney Island and around there. There's a beach. It's not like an Australian beach, but at least to have a swim in the ocean there.
Definitely not on the Sunshine Coast.
No.
That's really beautiful. I interviewed a nature researcher on Monday, and she said that it's less about getting out into the wilderness and more about nature connectedness and relatedness. So it's about noticing nature.
Yeah.
And she said the funny thing about whether you're in the woods or in a city is you get the same amount of physiology benefits and psychological benefits of noticing a tree at a bus stop as you do being in the woods.
Oh, interesting.
And so I think just retraining people's concept or what their frame of what is nature, that was really interesting to me because it's counterintuitive to what I think we know.
That's interesting. And I think also just I probably focus on it a bit more in New York. We had my 8-year-old spotted a firefly in the backyard on last weekend, and then we just realised that saw all these fireflies flying around. They just fly around and just light up. And there's a cherry blossom tree in the backyard, and in spring, that had 2 weeks, was just this incredible flower-covered tree. I think and it's nice being in a place that's different. The climate here on the Sunshine Coast, the climate's subtropical, so used to growing all of the subtropical fruit trees and veggie garden, whereas here you've got the full seasons, everything freezes, so you can't grow anything subtropical here. But then it also gets very hot in the summer, so it's kind of been fun learning and seeing all these different plants and trees. And then I'm actually really enjoying the energy of a city again. I think I hadn't quite realised that I'd been missing that, but just meeting lots of interesting people. I mean, even the fact, you reached out because you're here. You probably never travelled to the Sunshine Coast, so...
I have, actually.
Oh, you have, okay. But probably not as much as you do New York, so we mightn't have connected if I was living on the Sunshine Coast, and that seems to happen a lot. There's a lot more people coming to New York, know that I'm here and reach out, and vice versa. I've enjoyed getting back into that city energy.
Yeah, I think there's this frenetic energy and also just having a lot more people. Living on the farm or living on the land is really good, but I do sometimes miss that whole colliding of ideas and connections and people and almost differences. I mean, when I was living in San Francisco, it was all very tech and software focused, but New York has a little bit of everything, and I sort of love that, serendipity, I think.
Yeah, and also living in a city that's very walkable, don't own a car here, whereas on the Sunshine Coast, I'd spend an hour a day at least in the car, drive the kids to school, drive to the grocery store, drive to the gym, whereas here all of that is very walkable or I cycle most of the time if I'm commuting anywhere, or otherwise get the subway, and that's all a lot easier. Constantly bumping into people is really, at least where we live, there's a really strong sense of community.
Just a few more sort of questions. I wanted to just go back for a second. Can you tell me one of the reasons why you're focusing on taste? I heard you mention somewhere that you sort of avoided that sustainability angle for certain reasons. Can you explore that? Because I think that might be not a mistake, but it's an avenue that a lot of other brands go down. And I guess what's your sort of insight there?
Yeah, so to clarify, the business, as a business, we focus on sustainability, but in our communication to customers, less so. So in all of our experience, and a lot of the consumer research points to, it's a similar issue with what we had in Shoes of Prey. If you ask consumers, do you want to eat sustainably? Everyone says like, yes, I want to eat food that's more sustainable. But if you actually watch their behavior, they don't eat sustainably. Like they're not going to pay any extra for anything sustainable, and they're not going to eat something that doesn't taste amazing just because it's sustainable. I mean, if people were doing that, sales of tofu and tempeh and all these other foods and mushrooms that are super sustainable, those sales would be really high. But we only eat a couple of kilograms of mushrooms every year. We eat 100 kilograms of meat every year in the West. So people will say they want to eat sustainably, but it's not actually how they behave. The way they behave is all focused on, like for food, it's taste and price, and maybe a little bit of health for some segments of consumers. So when you're communicating with the consumer, you've only got a very limited, short amount of time to grab their attention. If they're ordering on a restaurant, it's literally a couple of words on a menu board, or if they're buying something in a grocery store, it's just a little bit of information and call outs on a pack. So we found if you mention anything around sustainability, it reduces sales in our experience with our products. If we focus on taste and texture, people will buy it. So our menu naming, we encourage restaurants not to talk about sustainability or not put us in a vegan section of the menu. And in a Mexican restaurant, call us Shiitake carnitas or pulled shiitake mushrooms, or something that leans into mushrooms and leans into a flavour or a texture profile. And then in anything retail, don't talk about sustainability. Have a beautiful image on the front of the pack of the product looking delicious, and just have the call outs and messaging focus on flavour first. Interesting insight. And then as a business, be incredibly sustainable, because that's a core part of why we started the business. But and have places where that information is available if the consumers who do act on sustainability can find it, but don't make that the focus. Yeah.
If someone's skeptical about mushrooms, what would you serve them first?
I'd either do two things. If I had fresh mushrooms, I would dice them, boil them. So this is not a very common way of cooking mushrooms, but put them in a pan, a little bit of water, and then boil them, and then more of the water will boil out of the mushrooms, so you don't need too much water to start, because more will come out of them. Boil all that water off, and it breaks open the cell walls of the mushrooms and gets a lot of the glutamates and umami flavours out of the mushrooms onto the pan, and then add some olive oil, some salt, pepper, herbs, and then cook all of that through the mushrooms, get that sort of cooked down liquid up onto the mushrooms, and then serve that up. I think that's the best way to eat fresh mushrooms. You get a really, really delicious, strong umami flavours. Or if I had our pulled shiitake mushroom product there, I'd cook that for them. We've sort of done all that work to the mushrooms already, so it's kind of get the same result, just quicker and easier.
I sort of want to smoke them. Get your pulled shiitake mushrooms and smoke them. That'd be pretty cool.
Great in a smoker. Yeah, my co-founder Jim has a smoker at home and does that all the time with our pulled shiitake mushrooms. And we've got some barbecue restaurants in Texas and across the US who smoke them and do that. Yeah.
Quick fire round. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, is the most underrated fruit or vegetable? And you can't say mushroom.
Most underrated fruit or vegetable. I love spinach. Raw in salads, it's great. And then cooked spinach is so delicious.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Favourite cocktail if you drink?
Margarita.
Good. Had a good one of those yesterday.
I planted a whole bunch of lime trees on the Sunshine Coast so I could, specifically for margaritas, yeah.
Lucky you. I can't really grow them where I live.
No.
Worst meal that your parents ever made you eat?
It's worst but endearing. Dad used to make mashed banana and Vegemite sandwiches.
Not sure about that one. I might have to try it.
Interesting flavour profile. You get the sort of the sweetness of the banana with the salt of with the Vegemite. On toast. Yeah.
I am a Vegemite fan, but I might try it.
Mashed banana. Yeah.
What word describes your life?
Optimistic.
What are you most proud of?
Either my kids or Fable, yeah.
Do you have any tenets or principles that you live by?
Try to be grateful for everything and just generally be optimistic.
What's one thing that's really mattered in your life more than you realised at the time?
Maybe food. Like, I think it took me a little while to realise how important food was and to really fall in love with food and cooking.
And then what's something that you thought mattered but realised didn't?
What other people think of me.
What is something in your toolkit for when you're having a hard day or a tough season?
Gratitude for the things that are going well and are good, yeah.
What's a simple habit that makes your life better?
Walking.
And then what brings you joy?
Interesting people.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael, for joining us on the Bountiful podcast. It's been wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, great chatting to you.